What's up, everyone? We're back for another episode of Locked On Bucks, and we've got some interesting topics to hit today because we've hit the mailbag. So the Bucks have a new jersey, or an old jersey, that is going to be new this season. So we're going to talk about purple jerseys, different lineup rotations, a Khris Middleton extension. What's the plan once Brook Lopez reaches that point where perhaps they're looking for a new starting center? So there's plenty of topics to hit today. Let's get started.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Papa Pittman. You can hear and see me on this podcast daily. And also find my work over at ESPN. Alongside me is the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Papa Madden. And we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen or your first watch of every day. And we are still in Greek national team mode. There's no doubt about that. I've been loving all the interactions with our Greek fans, and perhaps some new that have just found the show, perhaps some that have been listening all along. But as Frank pointed out on one of our previous podcasts, all Bucks fans are Greek national team fans now. Greek basketball fans, a lot of them are Milwaukee Bucks fans. So it's a pretty good relationship we've got going on. And I joke about Papa Pittman because someone put in the YouTube comments that my name is now Kane Papa Pittman. And I just found it, honestly, very funny. I'm easily amused, clearly. But I wanted to bring it up. Frank, do you think it's going to stick?
Probably. I don't know. There's some like Kane daddy jokes in here somewhere that I'm not going to touch. So, I mean, I am a dad, so I guess
that's true.
Papa can have Papa Madden has a less weird connotation for me. I just put my daughter down for the night, but I don't know. Let's just leave it. Let's just move on, Kane. I don't want to talk about Kane Papa Pittman, even though I feel like you're going to be using that more often now in your intro.
Nah, because I think it's actually embarrassing how funny I find it. So I don't want to keep bringing it up because no one else will think it's funny and I'll still be cracking up. So it'll get old very quickly. Greece did play overnight, lost to Spain. No Giannis, knee soreness. Let's call it knee maintenance. This is, again, nothing new. We've seen this for years. And I spoke with Josh Lloyd on a podcast a couple of days ago. He asked about the knee and I said, well, it's not going to go away. You're going to see knee soreness a lot. But I did laugh a little bit because we had an angry Bucks fan in the YouTube comments the other day, Frank. And this Bucks fan, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, was like, I am not happy that Giannis is playing for the Greek national team. I do not want to go to a Bucks game this year and see Giannis rested. This is not good enough. And then literally 24 hours later, he missed a Greek national team game with knee soreness. So this is the world we're living in. We predicted maybe he wasn't going to play in this game. The only people I feel sorry for is the 16,000 Spanish basketball fans that showed up to this warm-up game. And there was no Giannis, but he was in the building. So maybe that was still exciting for them. All right, let's get to the mailbag. Frank, this was on Twitter, by the way. Maybe I'll put a question up on YouTube as well because we've got plenty of weeks to roll through this. But there was some news today. It was around the return of the purple jersey. So if I pull it up here on the screen for people watching on YouTube that maybe haven't caught this, look at this thing of beauty. Going back to the 90s. Going back to the 90s with this one. So there was plenty of questions. Firstly, Frank, do you like this jersey? But Andy Menchel, a good friend of ours, Josh Semro, Jake McCorn, Anil Saw, and Blake. There was plenty of questions about this jersey. Frank, do you like it? And Anil Saw asked, are you a villain if you don't like them? So maybe these two things tie in together.
My diplomatic answer is that it makes me happy that so many people are happy about this jersey coming back. You know, I definitely am much more interested in jerseys and talking about jerseys than you are, I would say. Mm-hmm. But I would also say I don't like get particularly bent out of shape about them, especially now. Like, you know, back in the day, it was like, oh, we're getting new jerseys. Like, these are the jerseys we're going to be stuck for the next, 7 to 10 years. Now, with the way we get, new jerseys every year, if you don't like them, wait a year, right? I mean, you'll have to see them 10 times or something, and then they're probably going to be gone. So, yeah, I don't get too bent out of shape about them. There's definitely some that I like more than others. I think the black and white ish ones, cream accented ones that came out here a few weeks back. I don't think I was on when you talked about those. I think those are really sharp. I mean, they're essentially the same jerseys as the green ones, the dark green ones from a couple years ago, which I thought were. I'm not really big on like the antler thing, but I just like a very like. I don't like a bunch of graphics on the jersey. Like the original Fear of the Deer ones to me were kind of cool, but they're always like also just kind of busy, like the antler horns and all that stuff. So I like that these, even though there's like still the antler thing on the side. I like that it's just a clean Bucks word mark, and I think the black, like it's very like kind of, it's not exactly black and white, but it has that kind of very monochromatic kind of effect. I think that's actually cool. So I like that one. I might buy myself a jersey of that one. Since
I had a jersey. You a jersey, nothing underneath guy walking down the street, walking the dogs.
I mean, I guess I think the move for someone my age with my lack of beach body would be to like wear a sweatshirt and then wear the like jersey over like the sweatshirt or something like that. That might be the most flattering way to wear a modern NBA jersey. I mean, more power to people that can actually wear jerseys and not look ridiculous. But I'm not in that camp. But yeah, I don't foresee myself buying a proper jersey. They're also not cheap, right? But I think there's been I've generally like most. I'd say generally like most of the Bucks jerseys in recent years, and I mean, ever since the rebrand in whatever it was 2015, I guess it was, right? Because Jabari Parker's first year, they still had the green and reds, and then 2015, I think they came out with the new ones. I just generally love the kind of the basic Bucks homes and aways, and I've liked most of the other ones. But I will say this, yes, the purple. In my lifetime as a fan, I became a fan. I started really watching in 92, 93. That was the Todd Day, Lee Mayberry era rookie year Bucks. And then I believe they had the like green and white jerseys for 2 seasons. And I think in 94, or maybe it was 93 actually. I think it was actually Vin Baker's rookie year. I think it was 93, 94. They came out with the new ones, which are essentially, what these are based on. It's weird. Like, even though I was a kid then, I don't have the nostalgia that so many people seem to have for the purples. I don't know. And I just generally like don't like most. I think the late 90s were like the worst jersey era of my lifetime in the NBA. Especially there were a lot of like, remember the shiny jersey era? This is a bit of an aside, but just like most jerseys were just like really shiny for a while, and like maybe it was the late 90s, early 2000s. I don't know what it was. And it's just like they just looked like even more absurd, like for normal people to wear them. But anyway, obviously the ones that they'll be wearing next year are not shiny. They've got the classic Nike swoosh logo. I'm sure I'll have a kind of a bit of a soft spot for them, but I just am not a big fan of the purple. I just have, negative feelings associated with the mediocre basketball that accompanied most of the era when those jerseys were worn. Yes, the 01 team did wear them, so we'll probably focus more on that. I did see some suggestions of trying to get Glenn Robinson and Ray Allen back into the building next year at some point, which would be cool. But anyway, so I'm happy that people are excited about them, and good for people that like these jerseys. Again, I like the other alternates we've seen. There's also a blue alternate that's been leaked, which hasn't dropped officially yet. I think it's a lot better than the blue from last year, which I really didn't like the blue with the wave very much. But I think our friend Dustin Godsey, Bucks CMO, Dustin mentioned on Twitter that they can basically do these throwbacks every 5 years. So in 2013, they did the 71-ish white jerseys. I'm sorry. 2013, they wore the purple head jerseys, that the antler, deer jerseys, the green and purple ones that a lot of people like so much. And then 2017, 18, they did the like roughly 71 championship era ones, something like that. And then now 22, they're going back to the purple. So by that logic, I guess it'll be another 5 years before we see like true, just straight throwback jerseys, and we'll see kind of what they do at that point. Presumably go to the 70s or 80s, given we don't have a whole lot of other time left. But hey, I'm not going to be a hater here. Not really my favorite, but at the end of the day, as long as Giannis looks cool in the jersey, like it'll be fun, and people getting excited about it will, is always good. And as Dustin also mentioned, he's been saying for like almost a decade, people asking when it's 90s night, why they're not wearing throwbacks. Well, now he can finally say they're actually wearing the throwbacks from the 90s. So shout out to Dustin. Finally, he can not disappoint people on 90s night when people ask, are they going to wear the 90s era Bucks jerseys?
Yeah, no question. We'll have to get Dustin back on the podcast. And you're right, I don't give a stuff about what jerseys they wear. So that was about 6 minutes too long, Frank, talking about all the different variations of the jerseys, because I don't care. But you're right, a lot of people do care. And I think they're fine jerseys. The first Bucks jersey I ever bought was a purple Ray Allen, this exact version. So that's my memory with the purple anyway. But let's move on to the basketball stuff. One final point I'll make. If Ray Allen and Glenn Robertson do come back, do you think if they have George Karl, also a friend of the podcast, walking down the tunnel, he'll get the huge standing ovations? All right, let's move on. BetOnline.net.
That's a good Bucks deep cut though. Like people who remember the standing ovations for George Karl coming into the arena back then, like that. That's a good way to figure out like who was a legit fan back then. But anyway, yeah. Let's get to the ad reads.
I don't think it would happen. Let's just say that. But BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. We had a question, which I don't think we'll get to today, but we had a question about the Bucks championship odds versus Giannis MVP odds, and which one would be the better bet. I think they're both pretty tasty, in my opinion. But if you go to BetOnline.net, you can get those odds and check out there. We know our guy Giannis is going to have a massive season. So BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. I mentioned this on the podcast a couple of days ago, but there is endless props for Kevin Durant. When is he going to get traded? What team is he going to play for? Will he start the season with the Nets? So if you've got any interest in what the heck is going on with Kevin Durant's demands, go to betonline.net. And there's also NFL, which is going to be coming back really soon, and MLB. Do you think the Brewers are going to finish on top of the division? Go to betonline.net and check the odds there. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, that's okay. Before we get into the direct on-court stuff right now, this is a question that comes up a little bit, and we've probably spoken about it at some point, but it's a conversation that continues to evolve. So this comes from Maverick Johnson. It's about jersey retirements. Who other than Giannis and Khris will have their number retired? Maverick suggests one more ring, and he reckons Drew is up on the rafters. I've got some takes on this. What do you think, though, Frank? Let's go to you.
It's funny. I think Eric, did we ever have this conversation, Kane, or did I have this conversation with Eric maybe a few years ago?
Probably after the title, I reckon, Frank. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think we had this we had a discussion around this, I believe, pre-title at some point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we were at that point we were kind of laying out the roadmap for Khris Middleton to eventually get his jersey retired. And I think it was I want to say it was the first Bud year, because I think there was like a little bit of a question like, well, this is assuming he re-signs with the Bucks and stays with, for a number of years thereafter. But yeah, I mean, I think at this point, like, obviously it's funny to look back on it now because Khris is, a lock basically. There's kind of the awkwardness of, and you could, so there's a little bit of with Giannis too, right? The fact that Giannis picked the same jersey as Ray Allen and Khris has the same jersey as Michael Redd, who obviously both those guys, I think, have a better claim on a jersey retirement at this point than their predecessors. But a little bit of weirdness there, right? Ray Allen coming back for 90s night next year might feel a little bit like, guys, I'm the best player in the world is wearing my jersey. That's a little bit weird. But yeah, I mean, it's funny now to look at Khris and he's just a no-brainer, given that, I mean, he'll end up, very high in kind of many, including the scoring ranks, kind of all-time Bucks stat categories and beyond that. Oh, by the way, he also was, this crucial second core on a title-winning team. I would agree that Drew has say he has the best chance of joining him. Obviously, he's a year older, but you hope that you still have 2-3 years of all-star-ish, level play. I don't know if he's ever going to make an all-star team. Thought he had a really good case to make it over Khris last year. I think it's kind of same thing's going to hold true. I'm going to be rooting for Drew to make an all-star game, in the next year or two, to see if maybe he can get back for the first time in over a decade. But I think, Drew, I think, is the obvious guy, just given, you don't need to be around for a really long time if you're playing at an extremely high level, which Drew obviously does. So I think we obviously expect him to be here for at least a few more years. So at this point, he's going on year 3. If he plays 6 seasons and he's got, 3, maybe 4 all defense teams, he's got a title, maybe he sneaks into an all-star game and just generally plays at a really high level. I certainly wouldn't be surprised at all if Drew got his jersey retired. And I think everybody else, again, I don't think there's anybody else for me that makes sense to retire a jersey. Brooke, Pat, Bobby, obviously were key role players in helping bring that title home. But again, I feel like you got to put your foot down a little bit on jersey retirements. I think the bar should be very high for that. I think you got to be like an all-star level player to have your jersey retired. And I think you look at the Bucks kind of current retired jerseys. There's definitely a couple that you look at and we're like, went a little bit crazy in like the mid 80s, late 80s with some of the jersey retirements. So yeah, I think it's as simple as saying the big 3 with Drew, being the most tenuous of that, and that would be assuming that he continues to play at a high level for at least 2-3 more years, and hopefully, if he wins a title, hey. then if Brooke is the key guy in another title winning team, like, hey, yeah, sure, let's go crazy, let's start throwing out jersey retirements. I wouldn't have as much of an argument, but I think it's kind of as was laid out. It's maybe Drew, and that's probably it.
Yeah, I think your point about where the bar is for the Bucks is really interesting, because some teams like to just, and when I say hand them out, I mean, you're still talking about like unbelievable basketball players. So I'm not disrespecting any of those guys, but the Bucks have 10 players that have had their jerseys retired. And if you just compare it to a team like, and for the Bucks, I think it's a relevant conversation. If you compare it to Chicago in the 90s, they only retired so far. They've only retired Jordan and Pippen. So, I mean, Khris and Giannis, for the longevity, they're going to have 10 plus years, which for the Bucks has basically been unheard of for all-star level players. Obviously, Giannis is a no-brainer. He's an all-timer. But Middleton makes absolute sense, even if they don't win another title, but hopefully they do. Drew is borderline for me, but based on the bar that's there, if they win another title and gets an all-star jersey, perhaps, maybe defensive player of the year, something along those lines, and he probably gets it, but no one else. I mean, I see some conversations, people get a little bit carried away. If Pat's at the Bucks for 8 years by the time his contract's done, yeah, but I mean, he's not going to be an all-star player. You can't have the bar there. I mean, we're talking about retired numbers. And by the way, the Bucks might run out of numbers if they hand it to Brooke and Pat and Bobby. PJ, you had a great role. Come back, we'll retire your jersey. Luka Vildoza now, unfortunately, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? Bill Russell's number 6 retired. So the Bucks have to be careful with the numbers they have available at this point in time. But yeah, Drew's the only one that has a chance, I think, out of those two, in my opinion. And by the way, I was looking at this as I was going through the Bucks numbers. We've got a pretty good record on Locked On Bucks, Frank. Out of the 10 numbers that have been retired, we've had McLaughlin on the show. We've had Bobby Dandridge on the show. We've obviously had Marcus Johnson on the show. So we're just going to keep going through the list. Keep going through the list and see if we can pick up a few more. Kareem, we'll wait and see. That one might be a little bit difficult to get, but I'm not ruling it out.
You're gonna have to wait until he has another like Sherlock Holmes crime novel or whatever come out, and then you're gonna have to
Promo.
hit his publicist for like, hey, we'd love to talk to Kareem about his novel writing career, and maybe we can ask him some basketball stuff. Oh, by the way, so yeah, that's our angle. So anyway, we just hopefully I'm sure his publicists or just watch this show or listen/watch this show religiously. So we just kind of gave away our tactics, but so it goes.
Speaking of Khris Middleton, so a question on his extension upcoming. This question comes from Jair Alexander. By the way,
Wow.
it's always great to have Packers listen to the show. And by the way, we're always very happy to have any Green Bay Packer that wants to come on the show. I think probably my number one target would be Bakhtiari for the support he has shown the Bucks over the years. But Khris Middleton extension, so he's under contract this year, player option for next season, and $40 million. Obviously extension eligible, or he is right now. He obviously will be next off season. Frank, let's be honest. You're the man to throw to here. What's the situation with Khris Middleton? Just the facts. What's the facts?
I think Eric laid this out at the Athletic recently. I mean, I think to me, the general rule of thumb is like, is he opting in or is he opting out, right? Next summer. And I don't really have a good feel for the hardest part with guys once they reach sort of this age range is, that you're going to be paying for out years that are presumably, and again, you cross your fingers that Khris with his skill set will age well, but by the tail end of a 3+1 extension, or if he opts out, a 4-year extension, you're not expecting that to be Khris Middleton at like 35 years old. So again, you have to be really careful that you're not kind of that you're looking far enough into the future and you're being realistic about where your roster is going to be at that point and what you're paying for. And I mean, let me say, kind of start with the caveat that, especially what we've seen with this Bucks team and the Bucks front office, what we know about what Giannis values, I don't think Giannis is on the trade machine looking at what kind of deals he could make for Khris Middleton. I think his view is, I mean, he said it right. Like the saddest day for him in the NBA is when he can no longer play with Khris, or whatever that comment he made last year or two ago. I would be very surprised if Khris Middleton went into free agency a year from now, opting out of his contract, and there wasn't some understanding with the Bucks about what happens next and what kind of contract he was going to re-sign. I fully expect, he will be with the Bucks beyond that option year next season. So not this coming season, but the season after. And again, that's going to be moving him into a different kind of a later stage of his career. But again, you kind of look at where the Bucks are, where Drew is with his contract. Again, to kind of tear the Bucks down to the studs and try to go sign some like a max free agent or something like. I mean, I get it. I get why people may mean that in theory, but I mean, again, you'd have to really literally take away basically like kind of all the core guys that got you here. And start over, and that just doesn't seem like it's going to be the Bucks' MO. I think it's much more likely that the Bucks just kind of ride this core into the sunset, and then there may be a hard landing at the end of that, and we'll see how patient Giannis can be at that point when Drew and Khris are kind of aging out a bit, and Giannis is at that point still, let's say, around 30, 31 years old. So that's the part maybe we don't want to talk about so much as Bucks fans, but that's, at some point, I think that's going to come here, because I don't think the Bucks are going to, look to trade those guys in advance of that or whatever. So, so I think that to me, the most interesting question is, he has a player option at 40 million. So where do you go from there, right? I think if you're a rational viewer of the game, you'd probably say, thereafter, I don't think he's going to be a $40 million a year player. Flip side being the cap will presumably, we'll see what happens with the next collective bargaining agreement, the TV deal. I think it comes in 24, 25, or after that season, somewhere around there. So you are starting to get into potentially a much higher cap world on this extension, which could again mitigate, the potential harm of giving an aging Khris Middleton a huge extension. But again, is Khris Middleton going to get, a $40 million contract starting salary if he were to hit free agency a year from now? I mean, there's going to be a lot more teams with cap space, but I don't know. It's a lot of money, right? I don't think he's going to be doing appreciably better, even if he is a 35% max eligible guy at that point. So I think, again, there's a good chance that I think the goal would be to get him at a declining number off of that. And then I think it's really just an interesting question of like, does Khris, do they see that as realistic? Are they expecting more? It is notable. Drew could have gone to free agency and been eligible for a way bigger salary than what he got. He signed the quote unquote max extension when before the title run, but he took less money than he could have if he went to free agency. And I could definitely see something similar with Khris, where they're able to get him on a longer term deal where he's not going out and getting, another max deal. And keep in mind, even at a 30% max eligible last time, he didn't get actually a full max contract, which makes sense because I don't think he's a max player. So again, whether he opts in and he gets an extension off that, I think the opt-in and extend would technically only be eligible this offseason. He could basically decline the player option and sign an extension up until next offseason. So again, it's not like there's a ticking clock for this summer necessarily, but I think it does put the Bucks and Khris in an interesting situation because they kind of have to start acknowledging sort of the mortality of his game and the likelihood that he's going to start declining. So again, I think going into next summer, there will be an understanding, maybe not an official contract signed at that point, about where he's going to be. I think if you're the Bucks, you probably don't mind the idea of going into the season, actually getting a look at him and making sure that there isn't some decline coming this year. Again, you hope the injuries are not, anything that really impacts him this season or long term, either the wrist or the knee. But again, maybe a little bit of caution and not just saying like, oh yeah, here, let's just max this out and ride it out and, throw caution in the wind. I think being a little bit careful about that and going into the season and sort of letting things play out a little bit and seeing how the team is looking and seeing how Khris is looking, I think that's probably the most prudent move. But the flip side is I don't think you want to get to next summer and be in a position where you're daring Khris Middleton to go to free agency because you're, lowballing a potential extension either.
And on future episodes that we had the mailbag, we'll get to the Brook Lopez decision as well, which a bunch of Bucks fans are super interested in. But to your point, we had another question in the mailbag that was around the quote unquote culture, whatever, the feel in the locker room, what the Bucks have been able to build. We all understand that's around Giannis and what he values, but also I think Bud and he is a player's coach and the personalities of the guys that play around Giannis. And it's going to be really difficult for the Bucks to get to the point, particularly if they win a title this year. You've won 2 titles with this group. You win 2 titles, and I don't foresee the Bucks blowing it up with the guys that have absolutely led them to that title. But also then you're balancing, well, these guys deserve whatever they're going to get on the market, and we probably should pay them what they've been able to bring to the franchise. What does that mean long term? And the reality is there's going to be some Bucks fans out there that don't give a crap. And they'll say, well, we want to maximize Giannis's future. He's still under 30 years old. If you max Khris Middleton, is that maximizing the potential for Giannis to win multiple rings down the road? It will depend on how those guys age, I think. But yeah, no question. I think next summer is going to be far more interesting than anything we saw this year. But interested to hear what people think. The one last point I'll make, and everyone knows that I love Khris Middleton. I just love it that we're already talking about the next Khris Middleton contract. Remember all those tweets? Mark my words, the Bucks are going to regret this contract with Khris Middleton. This is a disgrace. This is embarrassing. He does not deserve all this money. That was dumb at the time, and it's proven to be dumb now. So I enjoy.
Remember, there was, there were the people that were saying you're going to regret paying Khris Middleton and not Malcolm Brogdon.
Yeah, that worked out well.
Malcolm Brogdon's like plays 40 to 50 games a year and just got, basically gifted to Boston. Again, I think he's a good fit in Boston, but essentially I think looks like he's going to come off the bench and basically be, kind of a super sub. He kind of realized that he's not the guy, he's not a top end starter in Indiana, and nobody really wanted to give up a whole lot to give him a chance to be a starting caliber point guard elsewhere. So, credit to him for kind of realizing that, like, basically he's the guy that the Bucks were he's basically how the Bucks used him, is essentially his best role, right? Being kind of a role playing starter slash, second unit kind of scorer type. But that was funny. And then there was also the like, should the Bucks have given, Bogdan Bogdanovic the $72 million 4-year contract that the Jazz got him for? Like, would that have been a better deal than giving Khris Middleton way more money than that? No, like whatever incremental flexibility you get from having Bogdanovic does not get you, a higher end star somehow, some other way. So anyway, so yeah, we were right. Stupid people were wrong, and moving on.
It's happy days. All right, we got plenty more questions. I'm going to wrap this episode right now, though, because we have to keep it to 30 because there's far too much off season to come. Frank. So I haven't discussed this with you. If you want to continue chatting, we can start a new episode. But I'm cutting it right here for this week. Obviously, we'll keep you guys all up to date with the Greek national team. Any news that comes through, mostly from our friends over there in Greece. Harris, of course, friend of Locked On Bucks. And I think Eric Name's lurking around there somewhere. He was trying to act like he wasn't over there to watch basketball, but he's not fooling anyone. It's not a family holiday, Eric. You're over there to try and get some scoops. So who knows? We'll see if any news comes up. More questions to come. I'll put something on YouTube so the exclusive YouTube watchers, viewers can throw their questions in as well, and we'll continue hitting them over the next few weeks. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next time.